And welcome back. Former President Thabo Mbeki believes it's important for the African continent to intervene in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He also doubts that South Africa will arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin when he arrives in August for the 15th BRICS Summit in Durban. Mbeki made these and other remarks in a wide-ranging interview with Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo in Guinea's capital, Conakry, to mark Africa Day.
Former President Thabo Mbeki has been a vocal advocate for Africa's renaissance for decades. For the past 12 years, a foundation that carries his name has hosted the Africa Day lecture. And to date, it's always been held in South Africa, but not anymore. On Thursday, Newzroom Afrika sat down with the former president in Guinea's capital city, Conakry, the host of this year's lecture. Mbeki started the conversation by welcoming the African Union decision to send a 6-member delegation to mediate in the Russia-Ukraine feud.
I think it's important that the African continent has intervened at that level. I think it's important because that conflict, apart from anything else, has affected the continent very directly. Because a lot of the wheat that we get on the continent comes from there. A lot of the fertilizer that we get comes from there. And when there's a conflict, it interrupts those two. So even at the last AU summit, the matter of the fertilizer was raised. Because there are many countries on the continent that have not been able to use fertilizer because of the conflict. And that produces food insecurity. So I'm saying it's important that the African continent intervenes at that senior level and hopefully succeed.
He then turned his attention to issues closer to home, including his doubts that South Africa had indeed shipped weapons to Russia to aid their war effort against neighbor Ukraine.
Specifically, the law prohibits the export of weapons to countries that are in conflict. It's prohibited. So if there had been weapons sent out, that person must be arrested and charged. It would be illegal, I'm saying, in terms of our own law. So I didn't believe the story that was said by the ambassador. But if I had been asked, I would have said there's no such thing that happened. What happened on that boat, I don't know, I wasn't there. But the movement of weapons, I think, is quite unlikely. In any case, South Africa does not produce weapons of the sophistication that the Russians are using. We don't have the capacity.
The doubts also included his country's willingness to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin as ordered by the International Criminal Court. Putin is expected to attend the 15th BRICS Summit at Durban in August.
Well, I doubt it. I don't think the South African government would engage in an action like that against any head of state. I doubt it very much. How they would deal with this matter, I'm not sure. What I've heard is that the Deputy President of the Republic, Paul Mashatile, is leading a group to find an answer to the question what is to be done. But I doubt if they would arrest the President of Russia or anywhere for that matter. There is indeed a challenge in that it's necessary for the African continent to do what it has decided to do, which is to establish an African Court of Justice, which deals with all of these matters that are in the Rome Statute, like genocide, crimes against humanity.
Finally, the former president also touched on the biggest crisis facing South Africa at the moment, load shedding. He says while the country and continent leaders have not lived up to expectations, some of the issues plaguing Eskom and some of its power plants are manipulated to create a crisis.
That's 19 years later. Why is Kusiland still not been finished, power station? Why is it taking 19 years and it's not finished? That suggests to me that there was a deliberate effort on the part of some people not to complete the building of Kusile, to produce a crisis. And that's what I'm saying. You need to understand the issue honestly in order to be able to deal with it. So the progress that we have not made since we talked about that speech you talked about in 1996, yes. Again, we need as Africans to ask ourselves that question, why have we not moved? And answer those questions correctly, honestly, in order to find the right answers. It's not happening sufficiently.
This year's Africa Day lecture will be delivered by Ghanaian-born Professor Siba Grovengai on Saturday afternoon. He is a lecturer of African political thought at the Cornell University in the U.S. For Newzroom Africa on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo in Guinea, Conakry.